Wow, it's so nice to see such a full room this morning. So, well, good morning. On behalf of the Seidman College of Business Alumni Association, I want to welcome you to our first Peter F. Secchia breakfast of the 2019-2020 year. And it goes without saying that we are extremely grateful to Peter and Joan Secchia for their continued generosity to make these breakfasts possible. So thank you very much, Peter and Joan. Well, I'm really excited to be with you this morning. My name is Jill Dooley. I am the Director of Philanthropy for the Phoenix Society for Burn Survivors, and we are a national nonprofit headquartered right here in Grand Rapids. You may not know, or for those of you that aren't familiar, Phoenix Society is the leading nonprofit organization. We are dedicated to empowering anyone who is affected by a burn injury. And our focus really is uniting the voice of burn survivors and the burn community around the globe to really focus on advocating for and advancing lifelong healing, optimal recovery, and burn prevention in this space. I am also a very proud Seidman College of Business graduate, and I am currently serving, thank you, for everyone in the room. And I'm also on the Seidman College of Business Alumni Association board. I'm really proud to do that and serve this university like that. I want to welcome our students this morning. We understand that your concentration and focus is probably on your classes and getting back into the study mode. So we really appreciate you taking some time this morning to network with folks in this room and just spend time with us. So thank you for joining us this morning. This is a really exciting time for Grand Valley. Our university has grown to who we are today through decades of really strong leadership. And I believe we can be just as confident in our future as we enter a new chapter of leadership for Grand Valley. I hope you are as optimistic and excited as I am. So this morning, I am happy to introduce Rabia Jamal, who is going to introduce our president this morning. Rabia is the Chief Operating Officer for Wasayabec Development Company, which is a Native American investment vehicle here in Grand Rapids. Rabia is an active and very dedicated Seidman College of Business alum who served in a past role on the Seidman College of Business Alumni Association and is now serving on the Seidman Dean's Advisory Board. He received an MBA from Grand Valley in 2011 and has a BS in Engineering from the University of Michigan. Please welcome Rabia Jamal.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. I was joking with Jill earlier that I work for a tribe called the Nottawasepi Huron Band of the Potawatomi, and our investment vehicle is called Wasayabec, and my name is Rabia. and I was joking with her that there should be a prize if she could say all three of those things together correctly. So first of all, thank you all for being here. There was kind of a little bit of a storm last night, and we still had a full house, so I think that says a lot about the speaker that we have today. So it is my honor to introduce our speaker. President Mantella comes to us as the fifth president of Grand Valley State University, and I think more importantly, our first female president, which is something that I think is something to be very proud of as an alum, that Grand Valley is putting a mark in its history having its first female president here. So we're very proud of that. President Mantella received her PhD from Michigan State University and led Northeastern University for almost 20 years. Among her objectives, I found, was she wants to focus on learner outcomes. She wants to make Grand Valley distinct and visible with its populace, and she wants to activate the full community, which are all things that, as an alum, are very important to us. Her background and experience in innovation and growth is in higher ed is exciting, and as an alum for Grand Valley, I am hopeful that she will lead Grand Valley in a manner that is consistent with its history, but one that also makes Grand Valley competitive and differentiates it well into the future. She's energizing, and as I was doing my research for introducing her today, if you follow Grand Valley in any way on the online and social media or read Grand Valley magazine, she's pretty much everywhere. And she's interacting with staff members, professors, students, community members, and what I found really unique is it's hard to miss. She has a big smile, and she's consistently smiling in all the pictures, and I think that, to me, says a lot about the leadership style that she's going to bring to this university. So I asked a friend who was involved in the selection process and has gotten to know the president over the last couple of months. I said, would you give the president 2 thumbs up? And I trust that friend very much and trust her judgment. And the response was a resounding all 10 fingers up. And I thought that was a really strong endorsement. So I will ask you all to put all 10 fingers together and welcome President Mantella.
Now I have to keep smiling through the whole presentation. Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. I really appreciate it. And let me introduce 2 other women who are leading the university. Our provost, Maria Cimitelli. Maria, would you please stand? And our dean of the Seidman School of Business, Diana Lawson. When I say that we need to do this together, I mean every single person in this room, and it'll take the full leadership and energy of the university and the community, which has been its history, so that's very exciting. Let me first begin by thanking Peter and Joan Secchia for not only this breakfast, but the warm welcome. You were one of the first people to reach out to me with some lovely flowers to lend me a supportive hand. I thought that last night was a little over the top, though, under a tent in the middle of a tornado warning, having dinner. But it was really a ball, and I got to sit next to these 2 incredible people. So thank you for doing this and the many things you've done for our community. So let me just start with, why am I always smiling? I have the best position in higher education, bar none. I mean, this university has a history, not only of leadership, which you mentioned in your introduction, and I follow some incredible men who led this institution over decades, and you don't see many institutions that their growth is all up and to the right, and that clearly has been the case here, whether you're talking about the growth in number of learners, whether you're talking about the growth in programs and relevant programs, whether you're talking about the financial health of the institution. The only thing not up and to the right is our state support, because it hasn't kept up with our growth. But largely everything about Grand Valley is healthy when you look at it on a balance sheet. When you meet the people of Grand Valley State University in West Michigan, you understand more deeply why it is as healthy as it is. And I spent the last decade in higher education working in the innovation space. And I like to think of my career as a little bit of a 360-degree walk around higher education, because I've worked on literally every side of what would be the senior roles in higher education, and then ended the last decade in academic innovation. So one of the things I've come to learn through that journey is what it requires to make change and what it requires to keep a community together in making that change, so that you're not activating, the change agents with you, the 7 or 8 or 10 or 20 or 50, 100 early adopters, but you're activating a full community, the 2,000 faculty members, the 25,000 students, the alumni, everyone, the community leaders. In that is that it requires the kind of commitment and energy and articulation of areas of focus and finding our essence. What do we want to hold on to? And again, in my introduction, you set me up perfectly, because it's what don't we want to lose about Grand Valley State University as we face the change. The incredible student experience, the focus on value in the education, the deep commitment with our community. Those are things we don't want to lose. So we've got to be able to anchor our essence. We got to understand why we're changing, and then we've got to understand how. And the walk around in higher education that I did, I think helped me to get into a place where not only you can articulate a vision, but you understand the layers of change to enable that vision. And so I'm really proud, I'm really excited to be the president of Grand Valley State University, and I really feel that this is an institution with that sort of entrepreneurial spirit from its origin, and has built that capacity because it's changed multiple times through its lifetime, and all that change has been to a positive end. So that creates a real agility. So let me talk about the title of this conversation today is The Future of Education, and I wanted to talk about a few things that I think are a part of our future in education. And I want to talk about, sort of 4 different dimensions of change that I think are in front of us. The first is productivity in work and life. And when you think about the pace of change, the introduction of technology, artificial intelligence, the access to information, the number of jobs that are going to be emerging over the next several decades, and the number of jobs that are going to be fundamentally changing, and the number of jobs that are going to be eliminated, it's going to be an unprecedented time of change. So when we think about education and its response to that environment, one of the first things that comes to my mind is how we're set up. We expect students to come in at 18 years old, and at 22 years old they leave, and they're set for a lifetime of change. It's not going to work in the future that we have ahead. We need to certainly use that period of time, and that we will always invest in that coming of age experience, 18 to 22. It's absolutely critical. And even more important is Grand Valley undergirds that with a liberal education that focus on what are the skills and competencies and ability that help us as learners know when we need to get something more and know what that something is. The problem we have is that higher education as a full industry is not standing by that learner when they need something. And at times, it is standing by, but it's offering their wares in the same way they offer it to an 18 to 22-year-old. So you say, come, we're going to assess you, start at the beginning, get out in X period of time, and that's the way in which we do education. So we need to think about education in multiple formats. What works for the 18 to 22-year-olds to be immersed in the experience. They're long on time, they're short on experience. They need that kind of immersion. And what works for us, people in this room, adults who are needing to upskill, who are seeing that technology is transforming their industries, who's seeing market shifts of unprecedented speed. And so we have to be able to create our educational offerings in a way that are accessible and that recognize that adults are long on experience and short on time. They're the absolute reverse. So how do we do that? How do we assure that we can offer high quality? Well, there's institutions that are in this business. Some of them are online institutions. Some of them are offering some innovation. Harvard started the MOOC movement, but they're not so they're either offering it as a commodity, or they're offering it as an alternative almost to publishing. You know, you can get content online, but you can't get any credential or assessment of the learning. And so there's an opportunity, and we don't stand alone at looking at this opportunity. In fact, over the last 5 or 6 years, there's been a lot of brand level institutions very much into what would be adult or continuous learning. So, but this fundamental change isn't a change of choice. It's needing to stand by our alums to offer elements of the learning that they're going to need over the course of their lifetime. It's a responsibility. The second major shift in higher education is the shift in enrollment. And this is probably the one that gets talked about the most, right? The demographics in Michigan are changing over the next decade. There's going to be an incredible number of students that won't be in our classrooms simply because the birth rate is lower, and the number of 18 to 22-year-olds are going to be spread largely among the same number of institutions. But I can tell you on the East Coast, we saw a lot of closures over the last decade of small private institutions, a lot. My last 2 years there, probably every month I got an approach from an institution around an acquisition because they knew we were opening global campuses and that I was on point for that. So a lot is happening, very, very turbulent times because of this decline. However, 75% of the higher education market today is not 18 to 22. So we're all focused on a declining market, and the larger market, because of the dynamics that I talked about, are being left to only segments of higher education and less quality options, in my mind. So that's another trend that we could talk about for the whole lecture, what's happening with credential requirements. Many of the knowledge economy jobs are still requiring masters. So the opportunity to think about the delivery that I've talked about for post-baccalaureate education is very high as well. So there's a number of opportunities in that space, challenges and opportunities in that space. And what's interesting is they can be reinforcing. So that if you have a high quality 18 to 22-year-old experience, and those students are very happy with the degree and experience, they're going to be the ones that know you and come back to you over their lifetime. So it's not an either-or choice. A lot of times in higher ed, we talk about, are you a liberal education institution? Are you a professional studies education institution? Are you a residential institution, or are you an online institution? We create these forced dichotomies when there are opportunities to do both, and that one piece of work, if thoughtfully done, can serve all those audiences. The third is inclusivity in higher education. And if you look at Michigan and the opportunities, and they're at all levels. I'm not talking about higher education as, PhD, master's, baccalaureate, all levels of education. We know that social mobility is fueled by education. And we know that there are more people to be served. And we know we have challenges in price, financial aid, loan levels, the way in which we structure our admissions programs. If you hadn't followed the interesting, high-profile, star-studded admissions debacle, that really tells it all. We have based our institutions on feeling better if we exclude people, right? That's an admit rate. Our admit rate, I came from Northeastern University. We went from admitting 70% of our students over the 20 years I was there to admitting 20% because the demand became so high. But we stand with pride on the 20%, when in fact our populace needs education. And we need to find ways to scaffold and ladder and support students so they're ready for the education. And we need to understand that not everybody relates to learning the way we deliver it in the same way. Some relate to hands-on and experience. And we are competitors, but if we don't cooperate in trying to move more of our citizens through education, then our competition is creating a disservice, and that's not meeting our public mission. And so I think the way in which we, Grand Valley State University, stands at the forefront is to be doing the best possible work, leading the thought leadership, and opening ourselves up so others can participate. And that's the way we get leadership and demand and interest. And as you said in your comments, that we get visibility. Because I don't want another person to have my experience. So my experience, I had been in Michigan early in my career, and I knew of Grand Valley State University, and I've said this a couple of times. I knew the nice little place that it was in the 80s. And I said, oh, well, when the search firm called me, I wonder what's happened at Grand Valley. And I was blown away by what I found when I started to discover, as I said. But when I told my colleagues, you know, that I was going to Grand Valley State University, unless they had a Midwest anchor, they said, where? And I don't want that to happen anymore. I want this time ahead together for us to be able to elevate what we're doing, not just for our own enlightened self-interest, which is of course there, but also because the model of education, the quality here, and I can tell you, I've lived in education, I've been at many institutions, I've opened up campuses and looked at the competitors in 6 different regions and 3 countries. And I can tell you, what we're doing here for the price we're doing it is amazing. And our nation needs to learn from the way in which we can make education accessible. Is it enough? I would love to be in a position to say, we don't do loans at Grand Valley State. Wouldn't that be wonderful? So if there's any philanthropists in the room that would like to help me with that, where's Karen? Did I do okay? Okay. No, seriously, quite seriously, we need to do more because, you know, for some people, the barrier is $5,000. For some people, the barrier is $500. So we need to do more because we want the brightest students, the students who are going to make an impact in their communities, to be a part of our community. But we have something that the nation should see. So we owe it to ourselves and to the state. And you'll find me to be a competitive person. So you put enlightened self-interest, competition, and the fact that I truly believe that it's in the national interest together. And we're going to really run hard at trying to cut through the morass and really have people see the good work that's doing here and model that. So inclusivity, and that includes digitalization of education, it includes access, supports. The fourth is what I would say is we've got to get out of our supply chain mentality. And since I'm in the Seidman School of Business, I know you all know what that is. And we have to start thinking of education as an ecosystem. And one of the things that we can't just start somebody at the end and they go, you know, to the other end. And I referenced that in thinking about the adult market. But it's also in the connection points that we have. One of the things that I feel strongly about is that K through 12 has innovation going on, but they're so isolated in its structure that they can't elevate it and they don't know how to scale it. And so higher education could play a role there. And again, that role is one of help and support to the citizens, but it's also one of increasing that pipeline through to higher education. So I mean it in a lot of different ways, the connection to industry, the connection to K through 12. It's an ecosystem. People should be able to go in and out of it and not have to come through it as a supply chain. So those are the dynamics I wanted to talk about, and I want to talk about just 5 elements, like sort of what did I learn in working in this space, and what do I bring in terms of some of my thinking around how you approach these dynamics of change and the opportunity we sit on with this wonderful, extraordinary institution. The first dynamic is we have to look outside in. And I think in every faculty meeting I talk to, I encourage people to look outside in. Let's not talk about what we have and what we want to push out next, because we have the opportunity to do that. Let's look at what the market needs and how it relates to the way in which we have opportunity to serve that market, and what does that mean. The second is, I like to call it work at the intersections. I wrote an article just before I came here for World News, University World News, which is an international paper in higher education. And I talked about really 3 things under the sort of working at the intersection: creating value, extending value, and alleviating burdens. And so I think there's opportunity if we don't put the sight line too far. So we need to know what the vision is. I'm talking about the change. But you know, when you're approaching an intersection, you can see the cars to your right and your left, and you know what to do. You see them approaching. We got to think about higher education that way, because the environment is so dynamic that if we try to be futurists, we're going to not really see the opportunities to sort of ladder to the vision. And so I think there is a number of ways to extend value. We can talk about it in the Q&A, but the most important way, and again, this institution is well positioned, is the intersection between work and learning. It's well positioned because there's all this relation. Look at this room. You know, it's the intersection of work and learning. Where are our talent gaps in West Michigan? What do we need? How do we serve the large enterprises? What are you doing in your L&D? How can we create a faster throughput for our cybersecurity students who are needed in every talent gap is talking about? Information, cybersecurity, computer science, project management. I could go through them all. And so working at the intersection of work and learning is important. I'm going to push for more experiences, more co-ops, more internships, all of the things that help create agile learners, because you know what? It's not on the syllabus. They go into your companies and the nonprofits, and they have to be responsive and apply that knowledge to what's happening in real time. So I think there's a huge opportunity in this disruption from people who are comfortable with change, have a community that supports it, have a faculty that think agilely, have students that want to look with you, have community members, and that's who we are. And so I think this disruption is the opportunity for the other 75%, the enterprises, the adults, and to keep performing at the highest value. That means everybody that comes in graduates. That means our price point is good, so their return on investment, the time to degree is good. So keep performing on our core business and keep innovating in the space where the larger market is. So I would like to, I use this phrase at my election as president in January, and that is that I think Grand Valley can be a breakout university. The nation needs breakout public universities. Michigan needs it. And I hope you'll all join me in reaching higher together. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm not sure how the questions are going to be handled. Who's going to handle? Is there a floor mic? No? Okay, no, there's no floor mic. So if you could just raise your hand, I'll handle the questions. I probably won't know your name, so I'll just point at you and then step up and tell me who you are. That would be great. So who wants to get us started? Okay, please, sir.
So my name is Nathan Biller. I'm a graduate of Seidman and an economics major. One of the shows I listen to a lot is Freakonomics.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned a couple interesting things. You said, what if tuition could be free, like no loans? And they recently did an episode about Purdue University having kind of this after they graduate. Is there an opportunity for us to learn from them, perhaps institute something like that?
Yeah, so a couple things you said. Just to correct, I said debt-free education. I didn't say free education, because that's a different discussion. But to your point, I think that there are a lot of ways in which we can think about not making debt the only vehicle, cash and debt, right? And I think the income share agreements have great potential. And I have a person who's hungry, because I did that at Northeastern, to come to Grand Valley. I think he emails me every week and says, you could be our next pilot. And so I do think there is an opportunity. There's some unknowns in that space in terms of how it's going to work, so I would want to be careful where we began and have students not, in some ways, doing the same thing, giving up too large a share of their unknown revenue over unknown periods of time. But I think there is some excellent places to pilot that, and I agree with you. Other questions? Yes.
At Northeastern, you partnered with IBM on pioneering,
Mhm.
I think, a future facility in terms of badging and microcredentialing. Is that something that you could see continuing here at Grand Valley?
I do, and I think we can take it even further. So for those of you who are new to the language, badging and microcredentialing is that certification of learning that comes in a smaller chunk than a degree, okay? And you get a badge or a certificate. And just to talk a moment about the IBM relationship is the recognition that we're not the only ones doing really interesting work in learning. And IBM was doing some extraordinary work at a high quality level. So we articulated their badge, certified it, assessed the learning, and rolled it into our credential as a starting point. And I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but I know their design thinking numbers were astronomical. Their project management numbers were huge. And that gave a credibility to the learning that was happening. And it gave an opportunity for those individuals to continue on to the degree with a bit of a jump start, of which a proportion did. And that was a very interesting model. And I think the ways in which that thinking can be extended are a couple of ways. One is the translation of experience. So we did it from a badge, which is our classic learning modality, right? You're doing it online, or you're doing it kind of in a classroom format, and you're trying to take something on new. But you can also do it in terms of the kind of the experience people have gained through their life, and certifying and understanding what that translates to in academic terms to give that jump start. And that's sort of called prior learning. And you can do those things in parallel. I like to think about it as stacking, so that we as adults, if you asked me if I was in the same place in understanding philosophy as the provost, who has her PhD in philosophy, the answer would be no. We both have PhDs, but our capability in that discipline is entirely different, and vice versa in the business affairs of higher education. And so it requires personalization, examination of experience, understanding what along that journey, like the IBM badge, and then stacking those things to the degree in order to serve an adult or a working professional audience. I would just mention one other piece of work that I thought was particularly interesting that we took on when I was there, and that was with GE in their aviation areas, their aviation factories. And because of the advanced manufacturing, digital manufacturing movement, the retiring workforce, they had absolutely sort of no model that could address the talent gap they were having. And so we brought a blend of online and work. It isn't like people need to leave their work in order to come to our classroom, and we're going to do it at convenient times for adults. But we brought the work onto the factory floor and articulated what they were doing into learning. And then we used the retiring workforce as mentors, trained mentors, because they had so much that was going to walk out the door, hundreds of years of experience. And then we took that and replicated it on a community college campus. Remember what I said, we don't always have to do it all. They had the absolute right physical facilities for that kind of work. And then we translated our degree on top of theirs. Really interesting work. So those are a couple of examples to give you a flavor of what I say is at the intersection of work and learning. I don't have a watch, so anyone that wants to cut me off when I know this crowd needs to leave at 9, let me know.
President Mantella, my name is Philomena, Director for the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation here at Seedman. So when we talk innovation, change, and trying things new, the idea of failure kind of goes hand in hand. So I'm curious about your thoughts on failure and what's your tolerance level?
Have I been set up, do you think? No, it's an excellent point. And I will say that the model I came out of, for a lot of reasons, again, which I won't go into, but set up a second institution. So if you think of Grand Valley State University, and then you think of sort of the child of Grand Valley, an accelerator, an incubator for educational change. That's the way the model worked. And there was greater tolerance for failure in the incubator model. And in fact, we'd start a lot of things in either non-credit or boot camps until they proved their market position. So very different than have an educational concept called a degree, hire faculty, many of which are tenure track, launch it and expect for it to work, right? It's sort of like fire, ready, aim, is our model. And so we tried to create a bit of a different model. So we're going to have to think through. I think the beauty of Grand Valley is the faculty are in the game here fully. And they've got that sort of muscle memory around entrepreneurial work. And so we're going to have to make space for experimentation, which means we're going to have to be, this space. I'm talking to the expert. This is kind of like, she could grade me and tell me if I got an A or a B. But we're going to have to set really strong, clear success metrics on our experiments. We're going to have lengths of time. We're going to have to figure out how we start things without investing in such a way that we've structured our costs before we know our revenue. All of those things have to be thought into how we make room for experimentation. Yes?
Hi, Dave Nikevich with Experience Grand Rapids. So with the growth of hospitality and tourism here in the school as well as in the community, with 22 hotels in development in Kent County right now, we really appreciate the partnership with Ottawa Hills High School and the Academy of Hospitality and Tourism. Are you hoping to replicate that at other schools in the area or in other fields of study?
I'm not sure I can answer that specific question because I haven't had an opportunity to really experience what we're doing there, to know a great deal about it. But I'd say conceptually, the answer is yes. So conceptually, you're saying we've got a growing field. We've got needs at all sorts of levels. So whether we do it specifically or we sort of stack from the high school to the community college into the field so that you're getting talent at all levels. And we participate at the level that we feel comfortable. It doesn't replicate others who, in fact, could do it as well or better or for a lower price point. So conceptually, the answer is yes, but unless Dean Lawson or the provost want to answer more specifically, I can't. Okay.
Hi, my name is Dan Pelletier. I teach supply chain management here.
It's okay.
From a traditional supply chain point of view into a more ecosystem point of view is absolutely right. From that point as well, one of the troubles that you find in supply chain management is siloed management of units within an organization. So can you talk a little bit about potentially breaking down silos within Grand Valley and intersections within Grand Valley where units can work across and leverage resources jointly?
Sure. So since you teach it, you probably also know that the first part of doing that is sort of shifting the culture and the way you think and the way you welcome diversity of thought to the table, because it's not, I run my area, and therefore you may have good ideas, but you're not in my area because I run my area. And so I think if you ask Dean Lawson or any of the vice presidents, there's a number here, from day one, we have established sort of rules of engagement for ourselves, that those who are closest and furthest from the work have value to add. And kind of ways in which we work as a senior team, where we're discussing some of those areas kind of at the highest level. The second thing that I've done is to create a broader cabinet structure, so that we have 2 deans serving on them. Dean Lawson happens to be one. The cabinet will kick off at the end of September. Our 2 faculty governance leaders sit on that, a broader array of administrators, so we can get information to a broader set, get people out of their silo thinking, if there is such here. And that's important. The third is what I call acceleration teams. So how do you get just a group of good thinkers around a problem set in which will enable you to sort of break through some of those issues, and not, you know, if a particular concept, you know, moves from beginning to end through a collegial governance process, and I'm aware, you know, we have faculty members in the room, it would still move through that process. But a lot of times it's at the 30-yard line, and we're getting it to the 50-yard line through an acceleration team, or it's at the starting gate and we're getting it to the 30, or et cetera. So those acceleration teams, I've picked 3 areas. I picked K through 12, the intersection with K-12, because that's the front end of the supply chain. And then I picked a challenge that we're having in the middle, which is where we have more nursing students than we could possibly want, or well, not want, but we could possibly serve. And then we have more need in our community. And in the middle, we have this challenge of the way we think about disciplines, scope of care, clinicals, all of these things that are structural in nature. So that's sort of a middle. And then we took computer science for the professional audience at the third. And so all of that is to break down silos. And I think those that participated in that, from the feedback I've got, and I say Paul over there, I don't know, Paul, if you want to stand and talk about it, but yeah, let me not say, what do you think participating in that was like? Not to put you on the spot, Paul.
Great experience and a new way of getting more voices involved and getting a wider variety, and I think opening up to ways of looking at how you think differently, to a simple statement, is very invigorating, and looking at where opportunities exist that we haven't looked before, and it's a great experience.
Thanks. The other thing that we do is we put money and politics aside at the beginning of the discussion, because they derail you right off. We can't possibly do that. We don't have the resources. We do for the CFO that's in the room in the back. We do layer it back in later. Or for Matt McLogan, we do layer it back in later. But it is important to allow yourself to think free of those constraints and then layer it back in and see, okay, what when we apply reality, how does it change it? But you actually are fundamentally at a different place. Yes?
Yeah, you spoke earlier about this forced segmentation of universities between residential versus online,
Mm-hmm.
professional studies versus liberal. Have you observed a need for Grand Valley to shift our model or our thinking around that at all? Do you have a vision for that?
Yeah, I see a opportunity for us, as I say, to not sort of accept the dichotomy and to be in all those spaces. And and I think, and I'm going to use an illustrative example because I think it will be helpful. In online development, there is work that Dean Lawson is doing that is extending it to the business portfolio to a enterprise audience or an adult audience. However, when I talk to our undergraduate advisors, they want a bigger piece of Dean Lawson and Seidman School of Business in the very same work. So new models to introduce some more digital gives an opportunity for the places which we have constraints to open them up a little bit more to our current audience. We also have, by the way, a student population that's many of them are balancing part-time jobs. And so talking with the student government, and I see them in the room as well, you know, they would like to see some opportunity, not to change the nature of their residential experience for some digital and online, to be able to find that course that's, you know, in sequence, perhaps that's in a different direction than their part-time job, and do that at a level of quality. So I think we want to be in all of those spaces. We're going to anchor in our residential experience, GVSU, plus be in some professional education, digital education, enterprise education. Yes.
You've gotten at this a little bit, but I just wondered, as a newcomer or somebody coming back to West Michigan, what are some things that you've observed around Grand Valley and you wonder, why do we do it this way?
Why didn't we win the national championship the last 4 years in football? No. That's a really, really good question. I mean, I think the first thing I would identify, and this is a challenging one, and the provost may hit me on the side of the head, but it is true that we've got to, institutions evolve. We've got to recognize the complexity of the current Grand Valley State University. And when you asked me that question, I introduced more complexity, right? So when I say it's going to take all of us, then structurally, where the authority and accountability lies has to rebalance a bit. So we're very, very centrally managed, and it's efficiency driven. And I'm not suggesting that we won't have a very clear central agenda and that we'll have a diminished role for that work. But if we have talent in our deans, then they need to be contributing not only to the growth of the school, but all of the areas we've discussed around there. Diana Lawson needs to be accountable for all of the areas we've talked about. See how I shifted that so effectively? So we have some rebalancing to do with where the authority and accountability lies. We've got some articulation to do of what those things that we're all driving at and what are the measures that sort of undergird them. But that's the thing, is that we've got a lot of, we've grown by evolution. So it's kind of time to step back and say, you know, what do we need now in terms of the structure that we have? And I don't see that as, you know, totally a mega shift, but there are going to be places where I think structure will need to be challenged, and I think where we're going to move authority. And we're going to hold, in doing that, you know, you don't just get the authority, you get the accountability that comes with it. So.
I'd like to ask the last question. We are the time.
I know. Okay. All right. Good.
So in the audience, we have current business leaders. We have people who are leading the businesses probably within 10 years or less. And then we have people who are new in their career and want to help to make Grand Valley a strong contributor to West Michigan and the state and beyond. What is the call to action to them to help us do all of the things you've outlined?
Great. So a couple things. Thank you for that. Yeah, thank you for that question. The first, for those of you in a position to where you're leading a corporate enterprise or a nonprofit with some serious talent gaps and issues, then let us be your enterprise partner for co-creation. Now, I've just acknowledged to you, when I say that we have great corporate support, but we haven't disaggregated our curriculum in such a way that we come right to mind as the person that's going to come in and solve your talent gap. So I need a couple of enterprises that want to co-create with us, because who are going to be tolerant of the fact that the community is going to be learning to work in this space. So I'm here afterwards if anybody wants to grab me for that. Second, I told you we love high-impact learning, and I think that those of you who are in a position to offer internships, co-ops, those kinds of experience, if they can be paid, you're helping us with offsetting our students' costs. That's even more important. I think that's the second element that I would say. For those of you that are entrepreneurs, 40% of the new jobs are going to come out of the work that you're doing, right? And that journey of being an entrepreneur, we need to, and again, this is not, we have not had our first conversation yet, but I think that the sort of availability of entrepreneurial skills and competencies and experience and practice has to be broad, not in the Seidman School of Business as the only place that one can access it. So I think that for the entrepreneurs in here, put your hands up that you're ready to take on work. Boy, it's wonderful to have a bunch of students working on your project and your issues too. And the last thing is your philanthropic support. So there are 4 calls to action for you. Thank you. Thank you.